Hi, I'm Chris, and today we're gonna have a look at the Synthetic Future XR Feedback Shift Register module. This is a neat little feedback shift register that packs some extra functionality. So first of all, what is a shift register? A shift register basically is a sample and hold with memory. So once you input a trigger or a clock signal, so for every clock pulse received, the input is sampled and put into the memory. The memory is linear, so when we have, for example, set a length of 4, there is 4 memory cells, and when an input gets sampled, it gets put into the first. And when the next input is sampled, this value gets then put into the first, and the value that was previously in the first spot gets shifted to the second spot. And when we record or when we trigger the module again, then it shifts one further. So the new value will be sampled into the first, the one that was previously in the first will be in the second, and the one that was previously second will now be in the third. And when we do that one more time, we have reached the end of a buffer with length of 4. And when you then push again, the value at the end will then just fall out of the register and be forgotten, except when we have this feedback dialed in. That's where the feedback aspect comes in, because we're feeding back the end of the buffer back into the beginning of the buffer. And according to which recording mode is set, it will interact with the input in recording mode differently. In exclusive mode, the feedback is ignored in favor of the input signal. In overdub mode, the feedback value is added to the input value and both are then stored. In blend mode, the feedback dial becomes a dry-wet, or not a dry-wet, a mix between the input and the feedback. Interestingly, if you turn negative feedback, it's still a mix, but the feedback signal is inverted. So if I put it to, let's say, minus 0.5, it's a 50-50 blend of input signal and the inverted feedback signal. So let's put that back to 1. And let's see how that looks like. So if I set the number of steps to 4, I have these 4 outputs at the bottom. The out 1/4 or 1/4 gives the output at a quarter of the sequence. Likewise, out 1/2 or the half output gives the output at the middle of the shift register. 3/4 at 3/4 and out the end of the shift register. So if I set a feedback shift register length of 4, this will be step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If I bounce that up to, let's say, 8, then the quarter output will be memory cell 2, 1/2 output will be memory cell 4, 3/4 will be step number 6, and the output is still the last step, step number 8. And likewise, if I go to 16, then a quarter of this buffer will be the 4th, half of the buffer will be at the 8th, and 3/4 will be at the 12th step, and output will still be at the 16th. So that is always at the end. Let's put it back to 4, because 4 has this unique property that all of the 4 outputs correspond to one memory cell. And here we can see how that looks like with the help of these bar scopes. So when I click this button, the feedback shift register receives a trigger, and since it's in recording mode, it samples this noise module that is visualized here and puts that into the feedback shift register. Okay, we pushed it, and you have seen all of the previous values get shifted to the right. Again, and again, and again. And from the left, so from the beginning of the buffer, new values are pushed in that are pushing the old values out. If I set to exclusive mode, of course. So all new values, in comparison to overdub mode, where values get added and they tend to grow. And in blend mode, it'll be a blend. And since we have feedback set to 100%, so at 1, it will only be the feedback. Let's go with 40. And you can see how these values are somewhat related to the past values, but also change according to the new input values. Let's go back to exclusive mode and disable recording. Now if I input a trigger into the clock, the feedback shift register will still advance, but since it's not recording, so the input is irrelevant, it will just push these feedback values, the shift register values, one step further with each clock. When I turn the feedback to 100% or minus 100%, the values that will then get pushed out of the feedback register will be fed back into the input and kept. If I have anything below 100%, the feedback will still loop back, but it will get attenuated and slowly fade out over time. So let's visualize that. We have it set to 100%, and with each clock trigger, you can see that the sequence is repeating. And you can hear the clicks in the recording probably. Okay. We have some more functionality in feedback shift register, that is the skip. The skip only applies to recording, and it will skip one step in the feedback shift register or in the internal shift register when recording. So you can craft intricate sequences when recording. So now, since we're still at 4 steps, all of these outputs correspond to one cell in the shift register. And when I record now, I will still have the value intact. Let's see, which one can we focus on? Let's see, this big one here. And it gets pushed one further, because now it skips a step. And it skipped a step again. And again. And eventually it will be overwritten, because if we have skip set to 1 and the step length is set to 4, then it will skip 1, add 1, skip 1, add 1, skip 1, and after double the step size or the size of the shift register, namely in this case 8 steps, it will have overwritten the buffer entirely once. Yeah. That was probably a very complicated way to explain this, but never mind. Let's go to an example. This one. It's basically the same setup, but I added a small 2-operator FM synth voice. That's just an AD envelope and an FM operator, frequency modulation operator, another one. And here's just a gate that attenuates the output when I speak. So that's just my explaining setup. And I think I turned down the volume by accident. Never mind. So in this case, we're sampling a melody from the noise that is attenuated to put it in a sensible range. And this melody goes through the feedback shift register right into the pitch CV inputs of the FM operators. And now if I push a button, which also triggers the AD envelope that controls the volume of these operators, we can hear this melody. And now, since I do not want to click this button for all eternity, let's use a clock. And we have a nice repeating sequence of 8 steps. Now if that gets boring, we can spice it up and just record another random sequence. Since we are in exclusive mode, the new sequence will take precedence over the existing sequence. can use overdub, but again, if you're not careful with the input values, things can get out of hand. We can use a blend to mutate the sequence over time. So as you can see, the sequences are still somewhat related, but they're always changing. Okay, let's get back to exclusive mode. See if we can capture some unique melody, and let's explore other outputs. Okay, so what I did here, I used one of the intermediate outputs of feedback shift register to provide a pitch CV signal to the first feedback modulation operator, that is phase modulating the second one, to get some interesting ratios. And because the values are somewhat related, as they are consecutive in the buffer, you can get some interesting results. But obviously it depends on the input that is sampled. Well, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed, and now you know how to use feedback shift register and how to put it in your patches and have fun with it. Enjoy!